everybody, welcome back to Malt Moment. It's going to be a bit of a different video today. Not going to be doing a review of anything in particular. Rather, I'm going to be showcasing some of the bottles that I purchased this year through something called budget consolidation, which is a made-up term that I just threw out there. What I mean by that is, instead of buying 40 or 50 whiskeys this year, I decided to do something different. I would take the same budget that I've always been working with, but instead of spreading it across 50 bottles, what if I only spread it across, let's say, 10 bottles? What kind of bottles could I get if I could spend more per bottle, but only have 10 bottles altogether? Well, the answer is some pretty awesome stuff, and I'd like to showcase some of this to you guys now, and hopefully demonstrate to you some of the things that you might be able to buy if you're really into the hobby of whiskey and you spend a little bit more per bottle instead of just buying a large volume of bottles or trying to keep up with all the new yearly releases that are coming out all the time. First off, credit to Mike and Narby of Malt Reviews for putting me onto this idea. I started following it in January of this year and I did my best to stick to it. So I'm going to showcase the 10 bottles that I bought by just by concentrating my budget on these bottles. So to start us off, we've got the Russell's Reserve 1998. This was an auction purchase, and it's the first of the Russell's Reserve vintages. I've cracked it open, had 1 or 2 drams. The review for this is up on my YouTube channel. If you want to go check it out, I've got the link in the bio to my channel. And spectacular bourbon, absolutely one of the best I've had. In terms of bourbons that have come out in the last 30 or 40 years, man, this is incredible. And just top-notch wild turkey. Super fruity, like way fruitier than you would expect a bourbon to be, like peaches and grapefruits and stuff. But then it's got this like movie theater popcorn and an intense butteriness to it. Stunning. I can see why they set barrels aside for this release. After that, the next culprit is one of these older batches of the Abralar Abu Nar. And the Abu Nar is sort of everyone's go-to sherry bomb these days. I got this at the Italian market. It is batch 30. I've previously had bottles of batch 17 and batch 20 as well as batch 35, and I was really looking to get another batch of the Abu Nar from within that range because sort of batches 15 through 35 tend to have been the very best ones. And the first sort of 14, 15 batches, it might be an unpopular opinion, but I think those batches were very hit and miss. It was a little bit of Aberlour trying to find its footing with the Abu Nar, and then by batch 15 they had solidly found it. And this is batch 30, natural color, unfiltered, 59.8% ABV. And the cask compositions for these earlier Abu Nars were supposed to be much older, but somewhere between 18 and 25-year-old casks were going into this. And the casks going into the Abu Nar now are definitely not that old. But I got this from an Italian shop. You can tell because it's still got that Italian market seal around the top. Looking forward to breaking that one open and trying it. So next is an Edra Dollar, which has, over the last 4 or 5 years, sort of become one of my favorite distilleries that makes sherry matured whiskey. This is a 21-year-old Edra Dollar, and the distillery says that this one is sherry finished. I kind of disagree because this was initially aged for 9 years in a first fill bourbon cask, and then 12 years in a first fill Oloroso sherry cask. So it's not so much a sherry finish as it is a double maturation. But hey, who am I to say? I'm just some dumb guy on the internet. Look at the color on this thing. You can tell that the 12 years in the first fill sherry really donated a lot of color and what I guess will be a ton of flavor to this single malt. But it's got some fairly decent scores if you go onto Whiskey Base. There's some reviewers and friends that I have whose tastes align with mine, and they said very good things about this expression, so I was very eager to get my hands on it. This is natural color, unchill filtered, again, 21 years old, bottled at 56.2% ABV. And if you've had Edra Dollar before, you know that Edra Dollar makes a very heavy, greasy, dirty, meaty kind of distillate, and it just pairs beautifully in sherry casks. And I'm very eager to see what an Edra Dollar this old in a combination of bourbon and sherry is capable of and how it's going to taste. Especially because Edra Dollar doesn't really put out too much that's this old. And I believe the vintage on this is 1995. Does it let's see. Yes, 95. And after that is not even a whiskey of any kind. After that is a Appleton Estate rum. This was poured blind for me by a friend, and he wanted to know what I thought it was. And I, honest to God, thought it was maybe an old Springbank, like maybe an old Springbank 21 or an old Springbank 25. And nope, it is not. It is an Appleton Estate rum, and that blew my mind the first time I had this. And he told me what it actually was, and it was just unbelievable. This is funky. This is industrial. It's got motor oil. It's got sort of this mechanic grease. It's got fruits. It's got this like barbecued pineapple and barbecued mango and grilled peaches. So fruity, so funky. You can really taste the cask char on it. You can tell it's been tropically aged, and it's got all like the stuff you would want from a rum. If there's no sugar added to it, it's all aged entirely in Jamaica in the Appleton Estate warehouses. It's, 26 years old. This is 60% ABV, and it's a pretty heavy congeners if you're familiar with rum making. So it's 1,184 grams of congeners per 100 hectoliters. It's very funky, very sweet, very delicious rum. This is bottled as well by the Vellier company. And for those of you who don't know, Vellier is an Italian company headed by Luca Gargano. Well, originally they were started in France, so I don't know if they're a French or an Italian company, but there's an Italian guy who is in charge of it now called Luca Gargano. Luca Gargano is the Silvano Samaroli of the rum world, and he's bottling some spectacular rums. It's worth noting there's 3 different vintages of these Appleton Estates. There's the 1994, the 1995, and the 1999. The 1994 tends to be regarded a bit as the best one, but they're all spectacular, and any of the 3 would be an absolute welcome addition to anybody's rum collection. And even if you're a whiskey drinker, you will be shocked at how good this rum is. Like, this beats out so many single malts I've had. Let's see, next, what do we got? Let's do these. Some Dusty Ardbegs are the next ones that I've got. This is the 2006 release of the Erinam Beist. The Erinam Beist, which means the shelter of the beast, was aged entirely in bourbon casks. So this is vintage 1990 and came out in 2006, making it 16. It is such a shame that Ardbeg could not keep up the stocks for this, because if they were able to make this a regular release, I really do think this could have dethroned Lagavulin 16 as the de facto Isla single malt. This is such an older style of Ardbeg distillate, and it's not even that much older. It's only like 1990s distillate that's in here, maybe a little bit of earlier stuff from like the late 1980s, but it's already different from the Ardbeg 10 distillate, let's say, of today. This has a lot more of a herbal medicinal quality. Think of tiger balm, mercurochrome, camphor, some sort of like mentholated oil. Very herbal, very stony. It's got a lot of limestone quality to it, and earthy. I've had so many samples of these Erinam Beists over the years, and I'm happy to finally have gotten a bottle. But for bourbon cask Ardbeg, this was almost as good as it got, especially for the mid-2000s when some very, very good Ardbegs were coming out. And again, this is also from the Italian market. I believe this one is also from the Italian market. This is the 2004 release, second ever batch of the Ardbeg Ugadal. Now, why is that special? Well, because these early Ugadals are so different and frankly way better than the modern Ugadals. This 2004 Ugadal is actually a composition of 1/2 10-year-old and 13-year-old bourbon casks and 1/2 1970s ex-sherry casks. Rumor has it that the ex-sherry casks they used for these one of them was cask 2393. And for those of you who don't know, the 239X cask series of Ardbegs are some of the best single cask Ardbegs that were ever released. And rumor has it that 2393 got used in blending for some of these earlier Ugadals. It's still bottled at the same strength, 54.2%, but this blows all of the modern Ugadal right out of the water. There is no comparison between the modern Ugadal and this one. This is just head and shoulders better. This is the bottle that kind of ignited the no age statement craze, and frankly, I can't think of a no age statement that's been released ever since that kind of outperforms these Ugadals from 2003 till about 2008. They're the most incredible value for money no age statements you could get your hands on back then. Very, very good stuff. Looking to cracking that very soon as well. Next after that, these art bags. We're coming down to the heavy hitters now. Last ones. This was actually a gift from my father, because he's been a great help to me over some of the hardships that I've gone through the last year or two. This is a 1931 vintage Pedro Jimenez from the Toro Albala bodega. Or if you're going to be proper, Bodegas Toro Albala. Again, 1931 vintage. This is an 85-year-old Pedro Jimenez. And the color on it is just, it's like balsamic vinegar. It's just so dark, opaque. You can see the viscosity of this liquid in the bottle. You can tell it's a little bit thicker. It's 18% ABV. And what I love about this, I don't know if you can tell, this is still in the bubble wrap. It comes with a little sample tube so that you can pour yourself a little sample instead of having to crack open the bottle if you want to try it. So if you want to just pour this for a special occasion, maybe see what this is like, you can taste it and then bunker the bottle for a few years. Now, fortified wine like this, at this age, you could store this for like a decade and it would still be fine. Hell, you could probably store this for 20, 30 years and it would still be fine. If anything, it might even be even better after all that time sitting in the bottle. So this is an extremely special, very rare wine. Inside the box, there's a little bit of tasting notes and more information. I don't know if you can see it, but this is one for extremely special occasions. And also, because it's a fortified wine, you can open it and then reseal it if you want, and it'll probably keep for another month or two. So you don't have to just have it all at once, as tempting as that would be. Especially because these very old sherries, specifically these Pedro Jimenez, are so rich and densely sweet. Like, having a glass of this is the equivalent of having a glass of fudge. Like, just take a fudge walnut brownie and blend it into a liquid, and that's what drinking this is like. It's so sweet and viscous. Not super complex, but one of the best wines. I love the Pedro Jimenez style of wine. I'm sorry, Serge Valentin, it's good and I like it. Okay, third last, we've got this Laphroaig 10 cask strength. I actually bought this from a shop in Italy. You'll notice a few of these are from shops in Italy because they're a little bit pricier because these are older and rarer vintage bottles, but Italy and some other shops throughout the European Union tend to be very good for some of these older finds. This is the original 1995 release of the Laphroaig 10 cask strength. Its debut from when it was in duty-free shops only. This is the perfect blend of the old style Laphroaig and the new style Laphroaig. This has all the mangoes and super citric, just got this intense grapefruit, blood orange, lime, juicy, fresh lemon, like a South African lemon. And it's all mixed with this smoke, but it's not super briny and super medicinal the way that the smoke of Laphroaig is now. This smoke is a little bit more woody. It's a little bit more like sandalwood. It's more herbal. Think of tiger balm or camphor oil, maybe a little bit of mint as well. These early Laphroaig 10 cask strengths were just something else, and especially this 1995 version, if you can find it. They all have batch numbers underneath the ABV. So if you're looking for the 1995 batch releases, you just have to look up the proper batch number. And man, these were just incredible. Of all the original distillery bottled Laphroaigs that have come out since like the early 90s, this has got to be like in the top 3 or 4. I can only think of maybe 3 or 4 off the top of my head that would be equal to or better than this. Just spectacular Laphroaig. And a style of distillate that they unfortunately no longer make. I hope one day they do go back to making it. Okay, down to the last ones. Springbank 21. This is the first release of the Springbank 21 in the 1990s after it was discontinued. So I think up until the late 1980s, if this is incorrect, please correct me in the comments. Up until the 1980s, Springbank 21 was bottled in these short, dumpy bottles. And then it was discontinued for 5 or 6 years because the distillery ran out of stocks. And in 1995, they re-released it and brought it back because they had enough stock that had aged up to that point again. And this is the first release. So the 1995 tall bottle Laphroaig 21. This is bottled at 46% ABV, natural color, and unfiltered. This actually still has quite a bit of barrel bits left over in it. And I'm sure the cork is absolutely disintegrated, so I'll have to take the cork out, dig out all the bits, pour this into a decanter, and do all the whole filtration process. But beyond the fact that this is an utterly stunning quality Springbank, something that stuck out to me when I first got this, because I bought this off a collector, this still has the original price on the back from when it was sold in shops. I don't know if you can see that, but it says £95. This is a hell of a lot more than £95 nowadays. And according to some of my friends and people that are more in the know in the whiskey industry, even this £95 is probably like a 100% or a 50% store markup. The original price of this bottle when it first came out was closer to like 50 or 60 pounds. So it's shocking to see some of the incredible quality whiskey that they were getting to drink back in the 90s for such a paltry amount of money, at least compared to how the market's gone now. But this is renowned as being, of the tall bottle Springbank 21s, this is supposed to have been the best one. And of the tall bottle Springbank 21s, they were released in batches between 1995 and 2005. But you can tell which one is the 95 because it's the only one that has this scalloped edge on the label in the front. And it's called the Jagged Edge label. So this Jagged Edge label is from 95, and it's the first of the 21-year-old tall bottles. All right, last, the crown jewel, the Hope Diamond, the Springbank 12 100 proof. This was bottled in either 1995 or 1996, and it's regarded as being one of the best Springbanks that the distillery has ever produced. Specifically, this one was bottled for the Italian market, but it's the 57% version for the European Union, or for the European market. These are renowned for having much, much older whiskey in them than 12 years. And the story goes that Springbank had a whole bunch of 12-year-old barrels that were overproofed and way too high ABV, and they had a whole bunch of very old barrels that were underproofed. They had dipped below 40%, and if it's below 40%, you can't sell it as Scotch legally. So they proofed down the high-proof 12-year-old stuff with the underproof 30 to 35-year-old barrels. And I hope maybe one day we might get confirmation from it, maybe like distillery ledger notes might be found or something. But apparently, these bottles are supposed to be 40% 12-year-old overproof and 60% 30 to 35-year-old underproof. So there is some seriously old whiskey in here, and you can kind of tell from the color alone, kind of hints at it, like how dark that is for a 12-year-old single malt. And taste-wise, I can tell you guys from firsthand experience, this absolutely tastes like it's got older than 12-year-old stuff in it for sure. This is unbelievably rich and viscous and complex. The sheer degree of complexity I get from this is unlike almost any other whiskey I've had. There's maybe 10 to 12 whiskeys I've had that kind of beat this in complexity. Man, this is just every flavor you could think of, and it changes so much as it sits out in the glass. You could let this breathe for an hour and still be coming back and getting something different out of it. Truly a remarkable Springbank and a piece of the distillery's history. I don't know if and when I'll be able to find an appropriate time to review this, but I absolutely do want to review it for you guys at some point in the future. But this is just phenomenal. This is like next level. This is whiskey that, like, it's of a style that isn't made anymore and never will be made ever again. And maybe, I hope maybe someday they make it again, but who knows? You might not see this style ever come back. But it has a reputation, and it's got that reputation for a good reason. This is one of the all-time best Springbanks. Probably the only way you're going to find one of these now is at auction. But if you really want one, and if you're willing to shell out the money for it, I will vouch that the quality of the liquid is unbeatable. It'll be some of the best stuff you ever taste. So that's all. So those are the bottles that I was able to acquire as a big fan of the single malt scotches and bourbons, and someone who's just really into whiskey as a hobby. And if you want to consolidate your budget, if you want to say, I've got this budget, but instead of spending it on, dozens of different bottles throughout the year, what if I just look at getting like 5 to 10 bottles and seeing what kind of really special stuff you could acquire? And you'd be surprised at what you can get your hands on. So that's all for now. I'll see you next time on Malt Moment. I hope you all have a great weekend. Cheers, everybody.